whether it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we are an international community. Welcome to this incredibly special session, I have to say, because writing a book is a labor of love, and the passion and the energy and the commitment to making a better future for administrative professionals is poured into this book, Staff Matters. And I have to say, if you haven't got a copy, please grab one. We'll put the link in for you to make sure that you've got a copy of this book, because it is exceptional. And myself, so I'm Lucy. I have had the honor and pleasure of learning from Bonnie and Lucy, two of my absolute heroines over the last 3 years, and their wisdom, their insight, their compassion, and just how much of their lives are dedicated to supporting the administrative profession, for me, is utterly inspirational. And as the founder of CNC Search and 23 years of interviewing EAs, PAs, administrative staff, I know just how much you deliver, the service that you give on a day-to-day basis, and how much still needs to change. The lovely Lucy Brazier OBE, CEO of Marcham Publishing, and many, many, many other hats, and particularly instrumental in the Global Skills Matrix, which, if you haven't had a copy, again, we'll send you the link to, because my goodness, your HR teams need to see it, are going to be really free-flowing with questions to Bonnie Kramen, author, trainer, executive assistant previously to Oscar-winning actress Olympia Dukakis, and we are in awe of this particular piece of work and cannot wait to start asking you all the questions that I know everybody is wanting to hear the answers to. So I'm going to hand over initially to Lucy just to kick us off. And we welcome your questions, interruptions. Lucy's going to be keeping an eye on the chat, so please don't be shy. Ask what you need to ask, and there is no such thing as a silly question. So ask away, either in the Q&A or in the chat.
Fantastic. Yes, and I would love to see questions popping up in the chat. That would be phenomenal. But Bonnie, I want to get straight into it. And I know that one of the things that you really stand for and always have done, in fact, I think the very first article that you wrote for me was on the subject, was respect. And that's at the heart of everything that your book is about, I think, and most of the other issues stem from that. And you've got your chapters called Respect and then Disrespect. But talk to me about respect, because there are real tangible benefits to the bottom line of respecting your staff, aren't there?
Right, there certainly are. And before I talk about respect, I mean, I deeply respect both of you. I love calling you the Lucys. And so Lucy Brazier, Lucy Chamberlain, thank you so much for caring as you do for this, for the profession, for the workplace. And you choose to respect the people who do this work. As I travel, and now I'm up to 13 countries, and that's in large part due to you, Lucy Brazier, what I have become so clear on 100%, what I know for sure, is how important respect is to the workforce. When staff at any level, from the CEO on down, feel respected, everything becomes possible. And the opposite is true. When people feel disrespected, that's when the walls come up. And of course, the definitions of those words is very broad. There are so many ways to show respect. One is as simple as pronouncing your name correctly. But beyond that, it's about providing a seat at the table and a voice, and knowing that opinions are welcome, and to not hear terms or expressions like, stay in your lane, know your place. Respect in the workplace of 2023 has everything to do with being acknowledged for the responsibilities and the skills that people have, that they're hired in a companies in the first place for those subject matter expertise areas. So it becomes incumbent on leaders to pay attention to the different ways that people need to feel respected, and to really be aware and mindful of when people feel disrespected, because that's when quiet quitting happens. That's when you have very poor retention. So there's every case to be made for being respectful and every reason to not be disrespectful.
I think that's, yeah, I could not agree more. And actually, just you touched on something as you were talking about respect, which was a seat at the table. And I was with a very large group of their particular title was executive assistants, who were asking, what does that actually look like in reality? What does, so they were really interested in understanding what a seat at the table was in reality. And I'd love to know your thoughts on what that actually is.
Yeah,
How do you live and breathe that?
And that speaks to having self-respect, having the whole idea that you deserve to be inside those meetings and not sitting on the perimeter, but actually having a literal seat at the table. But having a metaphoric seat at the table means having access to your executive's inbox. It means that when you are sitting in a meeting, that you're supported to raise your hand and say, well, I actually have a concern about that subject. I do have something to add about that. May I share it? To not permit being interrupted and to say, well, excuse me, I wasn't quite finished with that thought. It means having your literal seat at the table. And if you're not being asked to sit in on a meeting, ask to be there. Because on the back cover of the book, all over the world, we hear the expression how staff are considered the backbone of the company and the right arms to leaders, and you're the eyes and you're the ears and you're the lifeblood and you're the face of the culture. How many body parts can assistants be, for goodness sakes? So of course, if you're the eyes and the ears, it follows. It doesn't really take a leap. You should be the mouth too. You need to be the voice and that's what having a seat at the table looks like. And it's a process. It requires education, like everything else. So the book is very much about education. We need to educate leaders, HR, about what the role of the executive assistant is, and then to feel empowered to ask to be there. But we cannot any longer assume in this post-pandemic world that's so volatile and so in motion that leaders in HR are understanding. So we have to manage them. We have to manage the narrative about this role.
For sure. I think it's really interesting because I think when you get a seat at the table, it says you've arrived at a point where you're truly collaborative. And collaboration, I think, is something that's very misunderstood. But certainly for me, it used to be that the exec was up here and the assistant was down here. And by the time you get to a point where you're collaborative, you're working like this and you understand the skill sets and how they work together. And I know that collaboration is another of the really big topics in your book. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about that, Bonnie?
Yeah, I have a lot of leadership and management books in my collection, and I'm sure you do too. And most of them, first of all, frankly, are written by men. So that makes mine different just in that in and of itself. And then in addition, they're mostly about the leaders themselves. And what I did is I interviewed over the last 7 years, over 1,500 people, and I interviewed leaders and assistants, HR professionals, recruiters, and business school professors, in addition to psychologists, to help me understand the mindset, to help me with that chapter on sex, for example, where I really dive deeply into the differences between the ways women experience the workplace versus men. But collaboration, there is a person I've spoken to in this workplace who hasn't said that aspects of this modern workplace are broken. And if that is true, then no one of those constituencies that I named can fix what's broken alone. But my goodness, we must find ways to collaborate together so that leaders are hearing what staff has to say, so their opinions are valued and welcome and solicited. What concerns me deeply, and I know it concerns the two of you, is that as I travel, I hear a lot of fear in the workplace, where staff has a front row seat to what's going on in a company, but they don't feel psychologically safe to say what they see. They don't feel safe to be collaborators because they're not quite sure what the backlash and the repercussions might be. People are afraid if they speak up, they might get fired. They're afraid if they speak up, they might be labeled as a troublemaker. They're afraid if they speak up that they may not be liked, that they would be judged harshly. And you know what? In a lot of cases, they're not wrong about that. And so I'm concerned because what's our choice then? We can sit in the status quo, do nothing, or we can find ways to take the risk, to speak our minds, to collaborate with our peer group, and to find ways to have those meetings with HR and with leaders and with recruiters who are trying their best to populate this workplace with talented, skilled people. But if we have leaders who do not have all the information because of their staff being fearful, then that is a dysfunctional workplace that is not going to serve us, and it certainly isn't going to serve our children and our grandchildren. So if Staff Matters is about anything, it's about bringing the constituencies of the workplace together to have some empathy for one another. The subtitle of the book is Unfiltered Conversation with Staff at Every Level, in their words, walking in their shoes. And I can tell you that since late February, when the book came out, that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback I'm getting, is that the stories, the firsthand stories by the staff, are the things that are hitting people viscerally and resonating in a big way. And that's what I fully intended to do.
There's actually, I mean, like serendipity, I actually had my favorite chapter open, which is it safe? As you started to talk about that. And one of the beautiful things about this book, if you haven't yet read it, is there's a lovely practical aspect as well as the theory. There are things that each and every one of us can put into place straight away. And I thought one of the most beautiful things that you included was this wonderful agreement, the ways of working agreement. How do we commit to one another? And it's such a simple thing as employers that we can all do. And it's something that I've already taken to our leadership team to say, we need to make this pledge and this commitment to our team and vice versa. Do you want to share a little bit more about some of that, the practical aspects of how we can create that psychological safety?
100%. And it's not that hard here. However, the modern workplace has gotten more challenging because of the virtual, hybrid, remote aspect of it. If having difficult conversations was hard pre-pandemic in February of 2020, I would say and argue that it's more difficult now to do this over webcam. And I see our workplace as fragmented and fractured. And so the only way forward, it seems to me, is to have clarity on our relationships and partnerships with each other. And in the chapter, Is It Safe? I actually created, an agreement that executives agree to and staff agree to, where we put actual words and language behind our commitment to no bullying and our mutual respect for each other. It's a bonus in our workplace if you can be friends, but at the very basis, we need to be professional and we need to be mutually respectful. I believe companies could do so much better by putting this kind of language on the website to include images of staff that reflect the culture of a company. So if you want diversity, show it, for goodness sakes. We need to put language and images behind to illustrate, more than ever it's needed, to illustrate who we are, what we stand for, and what we want not only for our company, but for those people who are the backbone of the company. I'm pretty sure I cite Campbell Soup out of Camden, New Jersey, that it was so brilliantly simple. The whole notion that people have very clear, detailed job descriptions, and that when people are hired, they sign those job descriptions. Manager signs it, people and staff signs it. And then every year, it doesn't matter if they're there 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, they bring out that job description every year and they revisit it and they say, let's revise this. Let's talk about what you're really doing right now. It's about clarity. It is about specificity. The world over, I'm hearing so many complaints about overly generic and obsolete job descriptions. How can we ever move forward unless the people of our workplace are clear about what it is we're expected to do and what is it, and then put language about what is it that we want to do. So that's what the intention was in that chapter, because when people feel safe, they will tell you everything. And when people are walking around in terror and fear, as my BTUA students will say, they will tell you nothing or what they think people want to hear. That is human nature, plain and simple. And leaders need to get onto that.
I'm going to come on to talk to you about HR in a second, but what I wanted to do before that was just to say that at the end of each chapter, I love the fact that there are the questions there, and it really made me think, and I've already seen several people in the chat saying that they want to buy it, not just for themselves, but for their teams. And one thing I did want to say was that this is the perfect book with all those questions in there already to use for a book club. And I know that, Bonnie, you're very happy to, if they are buying them for several members of their team, to maybe do a chat with them about it specifically.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to highlight that, because that was what really struck me when I was reading the questions at the end, was this is brilliant. They can just get her in and then ask her the question. So anyway, let's come back to HR, because I know that HR and assistants are not the best of friends. Let's put it that way. And you were talking a little bit about job descriptions there, and I know that there was that article that came out that you had contributed to about titles as well, and why you didn't feel assistant was the title anymore. Can you talk to us a little bit about that stuff?
Yeah, we are at a very interesting time right now. We're in this post-pandemic world where people in different roles are looking at what they're actually doing and asking themselves, does their title really reflect what they do? And in human resources, many HR departments are no longer calling themselves that. They're calling themselves people, about people, people operations, that kind of thing. So they're rethinking their titles. And in the assistant world, we're still suffering from the stigma of the word assistant, and therefore looking for new ways to gain the respect. Titles are a way to have respect from internally in a company and externally in a company. And so titles and job description and compensation. Money is a huge issue, which is why it's one of the longest chapters in the book. But I spoke at a conference for HR on April 17th, the talent conference. And what I came away with was a bit disturbing. What I've come to realize is that the volatility of this post-pandemic world is at such a level that there truly is a lack of clarity on what the different roles do. And in the chapter on HR, I make the point that it's interesting how the same complaints from executive assistants are the same ones from HR. Some people feeling, marginalized and not having the seat at the table, and not having the respect, and not being supported to have professional development. So, it's funny that sometimes it feels like conflict. Sometimes we're in conflict because we're so much alike. And I see so much opportunity for collaboration between HR and executive assistants, and to open up a conversation, a meaningful conversation about how executive assistants do not have to leave a company. They can simply be leveraged more fully. And that was the topic for me at the conference, about how executive assistants can be leveraged. And as the three of us see all over the world, assistants are getting involved in computer technology training. They're getting involved in the hiring process and sitting at the table and interviewing people, because assistants are great at this. You're great at onboarding, getting involved in cybersecurity, getting involved in disaster planning. There were so many areas where executive assistants have subject matter expertise. It can be more fully leveraged by HR if only they knew to look to you. The reality is that executive assistants of the world are 95 to 97% female all over the world. And in general, we as women do not have an easy time raising our hand and saying, hey, I'm great at these things and I'd love to work on that. So what I tried to clue in the people, this HR conference, is that we need to be more proactive about the understanding about people's subject matter expertise. It's a new workplace for everyone who's listening. We have a golden opportunity right now, and I know we share we on this call share an urgency about taking action right now, so that, you know, if we're in this remote virtual hybrid world, the fragmentation and the fracturing is only going to get worse unless we get onto it. And the need to be on webcam and the need to be vocal in these meetings, because the invisibility factor is a real thing. And the people of our workplace need to get onto, but there are pros and cons about the virtual remote workplace. So I see that the world is running far faster than the human's ability to keep up. And one group of people that's having a very hard time keeping up is HR. And I believe executive assistants can be super helpful to them if only we collaborate. And that was one of the main points in that particular chapter.
And I think, so leading on from that, which is something that's happening a lot in London right now, and you talk about what's next, and ultimately getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is part of change, isn't it? And part of creating change. And what I'm hearing a lot, and I think this will speak to you and actually the book, and being able to use this book to help navigate the challenging circumstances we find ourselves in. But in London right now, for a lot of executive assistants I'm speaking to, there's a lot of confusion around what's happening. Is we've got a lot of redundancies. We've got cases like Lloyds Bank, JP Morgan, now monitoring their staff coming back into the office, being forced to come back into the office full time, which obviously when you've got a predominantly female population in a profession, that creates a lot of challenge around being able to meet demands externally. And we're seeing a lot of something called quiet hiring. So people being asked to do multiple, essentially not hiring anybody new, using who you have to hire in the positions and creating additional work. So it was very interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with a very senior level executive assistant to a FTSE 100 CEO, just saying, it's no wonder we can't create change because we're so busy trying to navigate all of these different distractions the whole time and protect ourselves. And so my question to you, and I think, well, what I pose to her is that actually it's in the disruption that we can create the easiest change, because people want that clarity, and it can be a win-win. But if you were talking to that particular executive right now who's concerned for safety, what would your maybe sort of 3 or 4 tips to having conversations that she knows need to be had within her organization, but is nervous to do so?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And it speaks to the issue that executives, CEOs were really caught off guard with this pandemic. And it just kept getting worse and worse. But I think we need a huge dose of empathy. The leaders, the CEOs who were the most successful in all of this change have been the ones, and I've identified them as 3 V's. They are visible. They're being visible to their teams. They're being vocal, and they're being vulnerable. And the vulnerability is about sharing what they don't know. My first, besides those 3 things to do, it would be about talking with key staff, gathering your key people, not just of your leadership team, but in the trenches, to hear straight from them what they see as solutions. These people who you've hired painstakingly in the first place, the assistants of the world, the staff in general, including assistants, really just want to be leveled with. They want honesty, they want transparency, and they want accountability. The staff knows when things aren't fair. And so it doesn't make sense to executive assistants to be told, for example, you need to be in the office 5 days a week. And then they say, okay, they get dressed, they do the commute, and they show up and nobody else is there. What I say to leaders is give your staff context. Tell them why you need them in the office on these certain days. And it's just not logical if people feel that it's not either fair or it just doesn't make sense. And so it becomes a conversation. Chapter 4 is called Ask First. How about we ask? Leaders need to ask their teams, what would it mean to you if we went in 5 days a week, or maybe we do 5 days, one week a month? The old playbook, the old rule book is gone. So leaders need to look at this workplace as a new landscape, using current staff to give you important feedback about what will work and what doesn't work. And to offer them context for why decisions are being made. We need to trust our staff as grown-ups. And what I've experienced, and I feel sure you two have had this as well, grown-ups, adult professional staff simply want to be dealt with honestly and told the real deal, and then they can handle it. But if they feel like they're having important information withheld, secrets, being lied to, being told, yes, you're going to be promoted and you're all this money. And then, just what happened in tech in January, February, March of this year, people being blindsided and laid off with no notice, and on Zoom and on email. It's not hard to understand the disillusionment that happens as a result, the mistrust that happens as a result of those kinds of behaviors. It's just not right.
I don't think it helps that, as you point out in the book, this stuff isn't taught in business schools. It's I'm always just so astounded by the stats when you share them about how little training the management get in how to look after people. They are given training in how to operate a business, but not how to deal with people. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
It was a huge aha moment for me. I put it right in the introduction and share this story with pretty much at every workshop I give. I've got a lot of Be the Ultimate Assistant alumni on this call right now, so they know what's coming. The Harvard Business Review article from 2012 did a poll of 70,000 leaders around the world to find out the average age that a leader gets their very first training in managing people. And the answer then was 42. And when Jack Zenger and his team repeated the poll in 2021 during the pandemic, the number had gone up to 46. So you don't have to be a math genius to understand that most leaders are out of school more than 20 years before they get their very first training in managing people. And so if there's a disconnect, it's because of lack of education in large part. And that's what we need to fix. And if there's any silver lining in the pandemic, it is that business schools worldwide have had to rethink their curriculum, and they are reworking it because, there was no curriculum that had information about how to deal with a workforce that's remote and hybrid and all of that. So fortunately, there are new classes being developed, not fast enough. And Jack Zenger's message to the staff of the world is, it's important that you know that data point about the lack of education among leaders and to act accordingly, essentially manage your managers and understand that you have an important role to fill at your company. And in the confines of that role, every person needs to be a leader in 2023. And that means speaking up to what you see. My belief is it's not just what you do in your job description, but it's what you know and who you know. And those things can be leveraged. And I try very hard in the book to give concrete examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that is probably one of the most powerful aspects of this particular book, because ultimately it's a win-win, isn't it? If your desire for an organization to perform better, to be more inclusive, is to share what you know and what you see that could be changed to create that better vision for the future for the organization, it's a win for everybody. So much is often is just around the framing, isn't it? Which is what you also talk about. How do you frame those conversations and how do you approach those conversations, which I think is particularly interesting. And even the part one about leaders' voices, I think for everybody to read that chapter is just, there's the insights in that one chapter is just extraordinary. And what came up, you touch on a massive topic, because ultimately so much of what we see in the administrative profession being sidelined or not included in training or not embracing the global skills matrix or whatever it may be, it's a diversity, equity and inclusion, belonging and accessibility issue. It's not a profession issue, it is a DEI issue. And questions that came up a lot before the talk was, actually at both ends of the scales, both the people that are experiencing ageism in the workplace, but also people, I'm hearing a lot, very entry-level assistants are also having, being named as entitled, coming with that generation. So I think we're seeing it in these sort of both aspects, where actually most of that generation just know how to advocate for themselves and say what they're happy to do and not happy to do and what's right and what's wrong, in my experience. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about your take on that in the book and why it matters to you so much.
Right. So when you talk about people who feel that there's ageism in play, when you talk about millennials who believe that they're being discriminated against because there's this belief system about them, when you talk about people of different ethnic groups feeling discriminated against and having bias against them, all of that adds up to feeling disrespected for not being able to be truly who they are. And when that happens, oftentimes there are lots of feelings that happen around those issues, which are things like anger and depression and sadness and disillusionment. And that eats up brain space. That's what I try to get to in the book, that when people are feeling those feelings, it is not possible to do great work. If you're worried about money, if that's at the front of your mind, or you're worried about avoiding someone who's bullying you, or you're worried about avoiding the person who is making racially disparaging comments about you, in our class, I try to give really concrete information. One of our students at Be the Ultimate Assistant said that, she has comments said, she's Black, and she about her hair and about, I can't sit behind you because your hair takes up too much room. When those rude, disrespectful comments happen, they preoccupy you. You cannot produce great work. You cannot have high morale. You cannot feel like you belong and that you're respected. And so the leaders need to know this, because this is hurting your company from the inside out to look the other way and permit these kind of behaviors. That's what's wrong with all of it. Does ageism exist? Yes, it does. And the antidote to that is for staff to come to the table with the skills and the talents and to put them in writing so everyone is clear about what you bring. The thing about millennials really annoys me because if, I hear it a lot, these millennials are so entitled. And I wonder, where did they get that expectation? How did that happen? That they, looked on the website, they decided to apply for a job at a company. How can they possibly get hired and think they're going to be running things at a year, or that they're going to be making $1 million in a few months? I think the fault is in the hiring people who, where are those expectations coming from? That's why the global skills matrix is so brilliant. We need clarity about what does it mean to work at our company. Let's understand the culture. Let's understand, this is what you can expect in this first year working at our company. Is that something you can agree to? Is it something you're willing to sign your name to? What's so hard about that? And, let's just be blunt here, about racial discrimination and bias and that it absolutely has no place in our workplace. The data is clear that a diverse workforce is a more creative, innovative, resourceful one. And so the big antidote to that one, I'm not trying to oversimplify, is I think we need, like right now in May, it's AAPI, stop hate against Asian culture. Hate has no place in our workplace. We need to do a better job about putting our hand out, our virtual hand out, and having conversations with people who don't look like us. At our Be the Ultimate Assistant workshops, I make sure we have a segment now on racism and discrimination. And I ask the question, how much of an issue is it in your workplace? How much stress is it causing people? If it is causing stress, then that's not serving an organization. And I'll ask, how often do you have conversations with white people about racism and discrimination? And oftentimes, it doesn't happen. And so therein lies the problem. We need to talk with each other. We need to collaborate with each other. And that means having conversations that may not go perfectly, but oh well, this is messy. I prefer messiness than the status quo, which is, I have grandkids. I cannot. This book was written because at some point I'll have to stop talking and the book will do the talking for me. And I know we all have children and grandkids and we want this workplace to be better. And it's not going to be a better workplace unless we can eliminate or at the very least, massively reduce these toxic behaviors which are poisoning companies from the inside out. Unacceptable.
I think it's so interesting, Bonnie, and I couldn't agree with you more, but my brain is going to the conversation that we had in New York with Simone White, who wrote that extraordinary article for me on the need for inclusion. And she is a woman, quite clearly. She's also Black, for those of you out there who are not familiar with her. And she argued that she wrote an absolutely brilliant paper for the World Administrators Summit, along with 5 other women of colour, about diversity and inclusion. But she brought the whole thing to a close by saying that she felt that assistants were subject to exclusion, and the fact that they were not offered training and they weren't treated the same as other people in the office was an issue of exclusion. She said when she looked at it within her company, BlackRock, she had opportunities as a woman, she had opportunities as someone of colour, but what was holding back her career was the fact that she was an assistant. And I thought that was just an extraordinarily powerful argument. She put out an amazing post over Administrative Professionals Day on exactly the same thing. I wondered whether you could expand on that a little bit, because I know that you talk a lot about the need for training and the need to see what the assistants are capable of. And I'm going to shut up and let you talk in a second, but I'm also thinking about that terrible thing that came out yesterday from the World Economic Forum, in which it was saying that we're number 5. I mean, it's better than last time where we were number 2, but they're still calling us secretaries on that and saying that the job is going to disappear, and absolutely not in my book. And I know you feel powerfully about that. But also the Wall Street Journal. What's the matter with the Wall Street Journal? The article,
I don't know. It's irresponsible. It is, yeah,
you know,
it's totally irresponsible.
In 12 months.
And at the HR conference I attended, these 2,300 HR people, the big topic was they can't fill these jobs fast enough. Not all the jobs were executive assistants, but many of them were. Yes, there have been lots of downsizing in tech, but there are many other sectors that are hiring like crazy and salaries are going up. So there's a disconnect between what the mass media is reporting and what the reality is. And that's why these webinars are so important. And that's why I believe Staff Matters is so important. And that's why your upcoming book, Lucy Brazier, is going to be so important, The Modern Day Assistant. But to answer your question, when we do not feel belonging, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a very real thing, that we want to feel respected, that we want to belong. We need to self-actualize by beginning with those qualities, and to have assistants be the only group that isn't eligible for bonus. For executive assistants to be the only group isn't offered professional development because erroneously they say that they don't contribute to the bottom line profits of a company. That is garbage. If executive assistants save their executives even 1 hour a week of time, that equals money. So to be left out is not smart for leaders. And unfortunately, we have a situation in 2023, we have a mountain of awareness to climb. So if you're listening, and this is true in your company, then our job is, your obligation, your responsibility is to seek clarity. If you're sitting with an obsolete job description, write it yourself. These HR people told me they don't have time to rewrite your job description, and who knows better than you about what you do. So we don't want to be left out. It's about creating a clear, detailed, specific job description, and then taking the risk to gather with your peers and have a conversation with HR. It's not an ultimatum. It's not a threat. It's about a conversation about how do we move forward in a proactive way that's a win-win for everybody. And that means leveraging the role. That means taking a fresh look, job descriptions, titles, compensation, and to bring globalskillsmatrix.com to them. But this is new news. We have such a great opportunity right now, but my friends, it's going to be messy or it gets clean. It's going to be pretty messy. And what I tell executive assistants around the world is the great thing about you is that you're great at cleaning up messes.
And we're into the last 15 minutes. So I'm going to ask my very last question. It's a short one, but I think this is the call to action. It's like your manifesto. And I think that the great thing is that the calls to action, the questions, as Lucy said, the tools that we can use, they're all here. And this makes you come across as a strategic assistant. It's it makes you sound like you are connected with company goals, vision, mission, values. So if you are going to have, when you set about this book, were there 3 things that you really hoped everybody that read it took away from it? 2 or 3 things before Lucy shares some of the questions with you.
Yes, Lucy, I'm very aware that often staff is suffering in silence because they don't have the words to say. And I was one of those people. I admit it, that I was one of you not having the words to say. And I feel fortunate. I was by Olympia Dukakis's side for 25 years. When I watched her again and again and again say the hard thing, and I got to see what happened at the table when she said the hard thing. And what I saw was this. I saw relief that that's what happens. And so my goal with Staff Matters was to provide the words to say, to give you the actual sentences when you go to HR to ask for a pay evaluation, and to have the justification. I see this as a tool. I wanted to give you the words. I wanted to give you the stories. Will give you the empowerment to know that you're not alone in this journey, and that each of us as individuals can take action, that we don't have to feel like we're spitting into the ocean, and that we have this, I think social media is a game changer. And what we're doing right now in this webinar, bringing Belgium and Africa and all these countries together on this call, sharing the same information. I urge you to grab a hold of these ideas. And I heard a great, if you watch the show Ted Lasso at all, I heard this quote the other day: don't fight back, fight forward. Let's fight forward.
And you can do it with honey, not vinegar, can't you? You can fight forwards with honey, not vinegar. It doesn't have to be combative. It can be about partnership. Lucy,
in fact, it works better. It works better when it's quiet, calm.
Yeah, come with solutions, not with problems. It tends to work better that way, what it's going to do for them as opposed to what necessarily it's going to do for you. Okay, I have a load of questions in the webinar chat and only 15 minutes to do it, so I'm going to leap in. And the first is from Karen, who says, I have a question around recognition. I support a national VP and 4 other VPs, and they're all great people. I go way above and beyond in my work for them, and most nights I'm working until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But when it comes to Administrative Professionals Day, they never acknowledge the day for me. The same goes for Christmas or birthdays or illnesses, etc. They'll have me send out very expensive gifts for the VPs for various reasons, but they don't recognize their admin, and I find it very hurtful. What would you do or recommend in this instance? And she is the only admin, by the way. It isn't that there's any other admins who could do that for her. And I actually think this feeds into a wider question, which I'm interested in your opinion in as well. So let's answer that one first. But I think, do we think Admin Professionals Day is still valid?
And that's an interesting point. Karen, you are not alone in this issue. It is probably a matter of obliviousness and cluelessness, as opposed to wanting to punish you or to intentionally want to hurt your feelings. The reality is that people are about themselves, and unless we raise our hand and say, this is my reality, and this is, as of right now, we have Administrative Professionals Day, and that I need you to be aware, HR and leaders, that this is not happening and it's hurtful to me. And even if you've been at the company for 10 years, it's valid. This is a new day to say what's on your mind. And that if it's preoccupying you, I love to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much stress is it causing you? And if you're getting a number that's 6 or above, then that's your message to take some action. You know what, Karen? I don't think you have anything to lose. The relationship will probably change, but good on you to speak up about it. If it's important to you, then it's valid to bring up. And I don't think we're going to turn off Administrative Professionals Day like a light switch. I think we have some work to do first before we let it. We want that whole saying, raises not roses. We want fair compensation. We want global skills matrix in place. And maybe then we do away with the day once, in general, profession is acknowledged. But as of right now, we have a long way to go before I see that happening.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's we'd quite like to be acknowledged every day, and I don't see finance finance professional day or marketing professional day, and I don't like the fact we get patted on the head. But having said that, I do know that a lot of you like being taken to lunch and having flowers and things, and that's always a good thing. I just like to see both things being done properly. Somebody is asking here, Joanna is asking whether there are any plans for your book to be put onto Audible, because they'd like to listen to it on the car, and they've gone away and looked and they can't find it, but they love to listen to it.
Yes, right now it's just in soft cover and ebook. And yes, I have a plan this summer to go into the studio, and I want to do it myself. So yeah, but it's 423 pages, so I have to carve out a good amount of time for it. And some money too.
Oh, I've got a great question from Lucy. She says, what's your favorite chapter, Bonnie, and why?
You know, there are 21 chapters in the book. I would have to, my first instinct is to tell you chapter 4 is called Ask First. It is some of the simplest advice, but it's pervasive around the world, that leaders too often skip over the step. They make decisions about the staff without asking the staff first about that very decision. And that simple move, they may think it's saving time and money, but it's really not. And I've been told that has been an aha moment for many people as they read the book. And for that reason, so many of them are my favorites, but if I'm being nailed to the wall, that would be what I would say.
Lovely. And do we think that AI is going to take over from, in inverted commas, secretaries?
No. You know, do we all remember when Siri and Alexa were supposed to take all of our jobs and like that? No, in fact, a lot of companies are forbidding assistants and staff to use AI because of security breaches and all of this. It's such a brand new technology that is untested, really. We're such at the beginning. It's a tool. It's a very cool tool that I would recommend staff embraces and understands it, so that you understand it and then you can teach it to others, just like you taught Siri and Alexa and smartphones and apps and all the other things. The more you understand landscape, especially in technology, the more marketable you are. And ageism goes into the garbage can when that 55-year-old is the one who's coming to the table with the answers about these things. Yeah, that's what I think about that.
Yeah, it's learning how to use it, isn't it? You know what? Don't feed any data to it if it's if it's secret, because you don't know where it's going. Because there was somebody a couple of weeks ago from Samsung who I think did that, didn't they? But yes, it's that I'm just seeing the most amazing uses of it. Go read about it. I think it's exciting, and it's going to mean you're freed up
Very
to do
exciting.
your stuff. And final question here from Muriel, who says, internal mobility in companies is still really taboo. How can we change that? And I'm assuming, knowing Muriel, that what she means is, how do we move up the ladder in career progression? But also, if we want to move into other jobs, how do we do that? Because that for assistants seems to be really taboo. It's just stay in your lane, keep being an assistant. If you want to go and do that, you have to retrain. And very often for other professions within a business, it isn't that way.
The game changer here is the war for talent, is that companies are having trouble hiring. And so what I urge all staff, and hi Muriel, to do is fill those gaps. Look for where the gaps are, and then see how you yourself can educate yourself, see how you can fill them. Raise your hand and say, I'd like to do this. Apply for it. If they say, no, you don't have a degree or whatever, there are new rules in this workplace. Do not let the lack of a degree stop you from trying to apply for that position. As Olympia Dukakis used to say, everything is negotiable, everything. And the real differentiator right now is gaps in the workplace that HR and leaders are having trouble filling. And you know what? They just aren't necessarily thinking of you as a possibility for the pipeline, but that's what they're calling it, pipeline. I think we have to try. We need to be proactive and verbal about our desire. Ambition is not a dirty word here. We really need to reveal our ambition and our desires to step up and to say, you know, by the way, when I take on that extra work, that the quiet hiring you were talking about, Lucy Chamberlain, is that we need to ask for more money for it as well. We need to evaluate job descriptions and understand if it's a full-time job, if it's a full-time and a half job, or if it's 2 full-time jobs, and to be paid commensurately for that role. I mean, really, it's about, Muriel and everyone on this call, it's about speaking to your own talents and skills and your ambition about what and how it serves the company for you to step into that role. That's what I think, is that we need to be more overt about our desire to move.
Because together we rise, right? Together we rise. And I think that that just because we're just on time, I'm going to sort of pass Lucy and Bonnie for closing comments, but I think this book presents an opportunity to strip away what we're all 3 of us hearing, which is a lot of fear. What does fear stand for? False evidence appearing real. The bottom line is the world has always been turbulent. Change has always been challenging, but nothing changes if nothing changes. And this book gives us the tool to create the actions without the fear, because the knowledge is here. And with that comes a sense of deep calm, and confidence is with trust. That's what it means in Latin, with trust. And when we start to trust in your skills and your abilities and your capability for creating the future that you want to live in, that's when real change comes. And this book offers that opportunity. So I don't say it lightly, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't truly mean it. Go and grab a copy of this book and share it far and wide, because for me, I felt quite moved actually in quite a lot of the book. I had real sort of a few quite sort of emotional moments, and then a lot of, right, let's do something more. We can make this happen. And together we are an amazing community. So that's what I'd like to say before we say goodbye. Lucy B, let me pass to you.
I think we all know, those of us that know and love Bonnie, what an incredible voice she has and how vocal she is on these issues. And this really, you know, this volume of work it's the result of 1,500 interviews. So it's not just her voice, it's the voices of the people who are out there. And to me, the most wonderful opportunity with this book is that we can put Bonnie's voice into the hands of more people. So let's go do that, because she has really important things to say.
And to
Thank you
Bonnie.
both so much. And I'm so grateful to everyone on this call today for seeing this. I'm painfully aware of how much is going unsaid in the workplace. And we cannot let fear stop us from doing what needs to be done, not only for the staff who is currently working, but our future staff, the world, in the form of our kids and our grandkids. One of the questions I ask in the book is for leaders: how would you feel about you working for you? You know, how would you feel about your daughter or son working for this company? We need to make it personal, because, you know, for as long as I can see, we're human beings here, and we're to lose the humanity in the sea of technology is not smart. And it is up to the human beings of this workplace to say so, and to insist that we slow it down and let's have some conversations. We have to talk to each other, and we really must be respectful to each other, because when that happens, truly everything becomes possible. So I hope you will reach out to me on bonnielowkramen.com if you choose to do a book club, if you want me to talk with your HR folks or your CEO or leadership team. It would be a pleasure. And I'll even try to bring Lucy Chamberlain and Lucy Brazier with me. Let us do what needs to be done, is what I have to say.
Oh, I always feel like my battery levels have just gone shooting up when I'm with you two. The energy, the wisdom, the courage actually that you two both have to stand up and be counted is just, it means